everyone, my name is Brittany Braga, and this is my video for our fifth issue, titled When Do Online Avatars Die? Now, overall, this issue comes down to your own digital legacy and the rights of individuals to gain access into accounts that were owned by loved ones that had passed away. Now, this whole sort of issue came into the limelight of transferring account information back in 2011 when a 15-year-old high school student in Virginia had committed suicide. Now, his parents wanted to gain access into his social media in order to look for clues that might have explained his motivation for this decision. But initially, their request to get into their Facebook, or the son's Facebook, was denied. Facebook's denial was based on federal laws at the time, and specifically the 1986 Electronic Communications Privacy Act that protects the privacy of minors. Now, because of this controversy, Virginia had passed the Virginia Digital Assets Law. Now, I believe the official summary is in the reading, but to kind of put it shortly, if you are a minor, your account will get transferred, if requested, to your parents or your guardians. But this brings up the whole issue of like what happens if you're no longer a minor and you're an adult and you pass away, because this leads to a lot more gray area, especially with certain services, where it can't just be transferred over to the executor of your will. Now, online banking accounts, for example, there are processes put in place to gain access to those. But I believe it's a little more tough to get into certain services, even under the same idea, like PayPal, and I believe they wrote Bitcoin, to get into a user's account that had passed on, because these are just fully digital rather than digital for convenience, but you can also make it in person or something of the sort. I believe another gray area is with email. And I believe it's a lot more complicated to get into a user's email account after they pass on, because of the whole idea that messages between correspondents are sent with an expectation of privacy, and they're expected to only be seen and read by the target recipient versus the executor of their will. Now, I believe Facebook, and I don't know how long this has been going on for, but I'm very glad that this is an option. Facebook will memorialize deceased members' accounts when provided with proof of death. Now, these memorialized accounts cannot be modified after they're set as memorialized, and logins just are not allowed, which is very good to know that they are protected from hacking and anybody messing with them or anything just gross like that. And it brings up this whole weird issue of, while we ourselves are not immortal and we don't live forever, it seems like our digital legacy will always be stuck and frozen after we're gone, which is very strange. It's a very strange thought. Now, I'm going to explain our technology in context a little quicker, because I know I do want to talk about my questions a little bit more and I don't want to take up everyone's time. But our technology in context was about journalism, and mainly just how technology has evolved news and news reporting, and journalism, and how now if anything happens and someone records it and suddenly it's all over the internet and it's all over the news stations, regardless of who had experienced it. And likewise, if any devastation happens, if any, let's say like a tsunami, I believe there was an earthquake recently in Tokyo, we know about it in seconds. Versus, I believe, I wrote it down, I apologize, the news spread very slowly. This was in the reading that in the early 1800s, it took about 4 weeks for newspapers in New York to receive reports from London had anything happened. Now, this was shortened with the telegraph in 1844, where news kind of was spread out between the next day. Something would happen, and the next day there were already reports coming in. Radio reporters offered live broadcasts after that, rather than waiting for a paper to print, and then likewise with television and whatnot. And this has all been completely changed and happens a lot quicker, especially now when we just use computers to edit and write everything and do everything. And even now, like you can set up a document to already have the format and just have a blank document ready to go. So every time you need to write that document, all the formatting's there. Or even just write your article and send it off to someone else who then does the formatting and whatnot. And it's very quick now. Now there's this whole idea too of social media. Things go in seconds and apps and whatnot. And I want to say this sort of as my last point, where there was even, for the reading, they talk about Jeff, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, so I apologize, Jeff Gralnick, who was the former executive producer for ABC News, who basically says, beforehand, in the old days, we had time to think about what we spoke, we had time to write, time to research, time to say, hey, wait a minute. Now we don't even have time to say, hey, wait a nanosecond, because we can say it or do it. Or just because we can say it or do it, should we? And this has led to, I believe there's a lot of pressure put on journalism now, especially, where you're not even given a minute to think before you say something. If you don't say something, you're criticized, you're castrized. And if you do say something and you say it wrong, you're criticized and castrized. And you're never just given a moment to think and to form what you want to say and how to say it correctly and whatnot. So I feel like technology has really become a double-edged sword in journalism, and just in news reporting in general. Now, I do want to get into my questions. I apologize, I'm already at 6 minutes. I want to open up the webpage just so I can read the questions directly. I apologize. So for our first try it question, we are asked to visit a social networking site that we frequently use and look through its policy on gaining access to accounts of deceased members on that website. So I looked into YouTube specifically because that's my most used social site. I'm not a big social media user. And I looked through YouTube's community guidelines first. Now this is, I guess, in the form of if your loved one was a content creator. No, I'm not. I don't know anyone who is. But for the sake of this question, there was nothing in the community guidelines on YouTube itself. But I looked around and I could find information under Google Support's webpage, and under specifically Google Account Help, you, the owner of the account, are able to set up who has access to your information and your account and permissions for your account, as well as you are able to set up, I apologize for the loud car, as well as set up the process for inactivating your account at a certain time. Now, just off the top of my head, I think your YouTube account, or in your YouTube account, let's say if you're a content creator, I don't know if you have to set it up any certain way, but I think you are able to give access to other YouTube accounts to set them up like as a moderator, because I know some people live stream through YouTube or something like that, or have permissions to upload videos, maybe. And I believe, and I saw this as a screenshot the other day, where I think you can set up people as managers, and I don't really know what that entails for, of course. But let's say you're a content creator, I believe you can probably set up like a loved one's account to have access into that account if anything happens. Now, on the other hand of this, you are able to make a request through Google to gain access into a deceased user's account. Now, when I was just setting up a request just to look into it, I was given 3 options for this. I was able to request closing the account on my own behalf of the deceased user. I could request the funds for the user's account if they were monetized, I'm assuming, as a YouTube creator. Or obtain the data for the account and to sign in, presumably, after I gain that, if I get access to that. Now for number 2, we are asked to look into online resources about digital death and digital afterlife. And they also give a link to look into. Now I ended up just Googling because I was just curious myself. Now I did find one website that I don't believe was actually on that website linked. I found it through Google, called Dead Man's Switch. Now the idea behind the service is that you set up the emails of trusted friends or family that you've put in yourself before you've passed on. These emails contain instructions, or will send out instructions, on how to access your important online documents or accounts, but they will also encrypt these messages with military-grade algorithms, ensuring that only the intended recipient can read them. This website knows that you've become inactive or had passed away, presumably, by tracking the last time you were active through sites such as Telegram or even your personal email. And I believe it even tracks like your browser push notifications to see if you're responding to them. And after not being active for 30, 45, and 52 days, I don't know if it's or and, Deadman Switch will then turn on and email those intended people in your life. Now, likewise, I found another website that was very similar to this called Ghost Memo. But instead of tracking your browser cookies and push notifications and see if you're active, it specifically will email you expecting you to respond like it's as if it's an activity check. And if you respond, then obviously you're still alive and active. And if you don't respond, you've become inactive. Your information will then be emailed out to those who you've set up, your contacts that you've set up. Now, Ghost Memo made a point on their website that this would very much benefit maybe pet owners. If you pass on and you have pets, it would send out like a warning to family members like, hey, this person's been inactive, or whatever message you set up, to check on the pets and ensure that they are safe and they're fed and that they will then still be taken care of. And on top of that, I believe you can still use it in the very same way, where if you're thought to be inactive, it will send out what you need it to send out to those who you've trusted or put up to get some information to. Now, to move on to question 3, we are asked to search online for state laws on digital passing. Now, Massachusetts seemed to be in this very weird limbo with a state law on this. And I read that Massachusetts is one of the few states that has yet to enact a law regarding digital property in the event of a user's death. Now, as far as I was able to tell, the revised Uniform, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I apologize, Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act has only gone as far as being introduced in early 2020, but there seems to have been no real progress since, no real progress in enacting it, because I believe on the 10th of February of just this year, it was placed under a study order. And I did write down the bill number for reference if anyone wanted to look into it more. It's SB 1033, and I believe you have to also search up Massachusetts for it. So for number 4, we are asked to look into the first things you can do in creating your own digital legacy. Oh, I'm sorry. The first thing you can, to make a list. I'm sorry. I should have written down the questions in a very quick manner. So we're given a website. Now, the website page that we are linked to doesn't totally work, and I believe it's just because the link itself is outdated. But I went through the website and I found the same exact page. So for anyone who was looking into that, it's just under resources on that main list, where you can get into digital legacy. Now, for my list of my accounts, it would just basically be my emails, specifically Gmail. I use Drive and Google Photos a lot. Any medical accounts I have, my bank account, my online banking, my PayPal, and just my social media accounts, I suppose. But they're really not that active, and if they are, I like my YouTube, like I don't post, but I watch stuff. So I don't know how helpful they would really be. Now, my phone, my iPad, my computer, typically all have like a password or passcode, but I'd probably add that on too, but I don't know. So for number 5, I believe we're asked to think about and determine a place where we would store our digital accounts, like our login information and our assets. Now, I need to think about this too much. I have a lot of my information saved in multiple spots, and it's mainly just for my own good because I'm super forgetful, and I'm also a little paranoid with my accounts, so I always have like different passwords for different things. So because of this, I for one have all of my accounts saved through Chrome. Now, I'm not sure if that's such a good idea. But I also have things written down on my notes app on my iPhone, which, again, I don't know if that's such a good idea. But then I do also have a notebook somewhere in my room where I physically write stuff down, just for my own sake, because I like to have things in multiple spots, because I'm going to forget where one thing is. Now, because of this, if anything were to happen to me, my digital assets and my accounts would definitely just go to my parents, my brother, my partner. And I don't think they'd really have a hard time finding my things, knowing that they're all over the place. There's so many spots where you can kind of find them. Now I'm sorry, I'm already at 14 minutes. My what do you think questions, now there's only 3. Have you ever thought about what happens to the social media accounts of people who are deceased? Now, this wasn't really a concern of mine for many years, but over the past couple years, I've had some deaths of those who are close to me. Now it's become a bit more of an issue, I suppose. Not so much of an issue, but it's came up to. I've ran into the issue a few times. Now, for me, I've had some of my deaths. Their accounts are still on Facebook, and they're not memorialized. I didn't even know that was really a thing until I did this reading. I don't think anyone would want to bother to go in and delete them and remove them. If anything, it's just a few pictures on there or like of past times, and I don't know why anyone would delete that. I don't even think anyone had even thought of that. But then I've sort of found this weird issue where now I still have contacts of those who have passed away, and it's not so much social media, but it's weird to know that the number is no longer in use, and then you scroll onto their name. Now I talk about this a little bit more in the third question, but I feel like keeping individuals' accounts online, they're a bit more of a double-edged sword, and a part of that I feel like they shouldn't be deleted to an extent, but it's a double-edged sword because you don't want to delete those photos, those posts and everything. Sometimes it's nice to go back and see them, but sometimes you scroll on them at the wrong time and it hurts a little bit. And I talk about that because we're asked, are memorialized accounts a good idea? I think they are. It's just a bit of a double-edged sword if you are affected personally. And number two, because I kind of talked about the first and last one, so I apologize. Do you know who might have access to your social media accounts if you meet an untimely death? My family, my parents, my brother, and my partner would most likely just get access to it, but I don't know how good it would do them, because like I said, I don't really do much on anything, and if they want to, I believe they can go through the process of getting my banking info anyway, if they don't already just have access to it. I believe my parents just have access into my banking info already. Just overall, this was a bit of a tough topic for me to look into. And it's very interesting, though. I won't disregard that. It's very weird because I've never thought about my digital legacy until more recently, I suppose, of like what happens to loved ones after something happens to them. But nonetheless, this was my video. Have a good week. Have a good spring break, everyone. Bye.